Love is the first and most essential bond, but it's also the invisible thread, woven with time, attention, and tenderness, through consistent nurturing relationships.
A royal banquet at Windsor allegedly descended into chaos when Catherine reportedly intervened against Camilla's own daughter, triggering whispers of humiliation, power struggles, and a shocking breach of royal decorum. What began as an elegant evening among diplomats and aristocrats soon became the center of intense speculation, with conflicting accounts raising serious questions about what really happened behind palace walls. Was this a necessary act to protect the monarchy's image, or evidence of a deeper divide within the royal family that few expected to see? So what do you think? Did Catherine do the right thing, or did she overstep her authority? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Whispers beneath Windsor's glittering chandeliers. The evening was supposed to showcase everything the royal family wanted the world to see: elegance, stability, and flawless tradition. Inside Windsor Castle, diplomats, aristocrats, and senior guests gathered beneath chandeliers for a banquet designed to project unity and confidence. Every detail appeared arranged, from the polished tables to the measured conversations flowing across the hall. Yet beneath that polished surface, something was already beginning to shift, and a growing number of attendees seemed to sense it before anyone openly acknowledged that a problem was unfolding. Among the guests attracting attention that night was Laura Lopes, the daughter of Camilla. Her presence sparked interest because she rarely occupied such a visible position at royal occasions. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She appeared comfortable, greeted guests, exchanged smiles, and blended naturally into the atmosphere. To most observers, the evening looked set to continue exactly as planned. However, as the reception progressed, concerns reportedly began circulating among those standing nearby. The change was not dramatic at first. Instead, it emerged through quiet observations and hesitant glances. According to accounts surrounding the event, some guests noticed Laura becoming animated as the evening continued. Conversations that initially appeared ordinary allegedly started drawing attention for the wrong reasons. People who had been relaxed moments earlier reportedly became more cautious, watching carefully without wanting to create a scene. In a room filled with figures, even small departures from expected behavior could quickly become impossible to ignore. As more guests became aware of the situation, the mood inside parts of the hall began changing. What had started as scattered observations gradually turned into whispered discussions. Diplomats and attendees were said to be exchanging looks that suggested growing discomfort. Nobody wanted to openly address what was happening, yet the atmosphere reportedly became harder to dismiss with every passing minute. The contrast between the grandeur of the setting and the uncertainty spreading through the room made the situation feel more striking. Some reports claimed that comments attributed to Laura were beginning to attract unwanted attention among nearby guests. Others suggested that her conduct was becoming difficult to overlook in such an environment. Because many accounts came through palace gossip and unnamed sources, questions remained about exactly what occurred and how serious it truly was. That uncertainty became part of the story itself. Supporters could argue that the situation had been exaggerated through rumor, while critics viewed the growing concern inside the room as evidence that something significant had changed. Whatever the full truth may have been, one detail appeared consistent across the accounts. By this stage of the banquet, attention was no longer focused solely on diplomacy, tradition, or royal ceremony. Instead, conversations were increasingly drifting toward Laura and the unease surrounding her presence. What should have been a controlled evening was slowly becoming something else entirely. And as whispers continued spreading through Windsor Castle, the foundations were being laid for a controversy that would soon grow far larger than a single guest at a royal banquet for everyone. Whispers spread through the Windsor banquet as uneasy glances began circling Camilla's daughter. But how did a night meant for celebration turn into quiet panic? Who noticed first? And why is Catherine suddenly being drawn closer to the unfolding tension? Let's find out. Silence before royal intervention begins. By the time concern started spreading through Windsor Castle, the atmosphere inside the banquet hall had changed in a way that was difficult to ignore. What had begun as an elegant diplomatic reception was now attracting attention for an entirely different reason. Conversations continued, glasses remained raised, and guests tried to maintain appearances, yet an unmistakable tension had settled over parts of the room. More and more eyes seemed to be drifting toward Laura Lopes, and with every passing minute, the sense that something needed to be done reportedly grew stronger. Across the hall, Catherine was carrying out the role she was known for during major royal engagements. She greeted guests, exchanged polite words, and maintained the composed presence expected of a senior royal. On the surface, nothing about her behavior appeared unusual, yet according to accounts that later emerged, she had already become aware of the growing discomfort surrounding Laura. While many attendees seemed unsure how to react, Catherine reportedly understood that the situation was no longer confined to one guest drawing attention. In the eyes of some observers, the issue had started threatening the carefully managed image of the entire event. That distinction mattered. A private embarrassment was one thing. A disruption unfolding during an important gathering filled with diplomats, aristocrats, and international representatives was something else entirely. The royal family had spent generations protecting its public image, and occasions like this were designed to reinforce stability, discipline, and tradition. Reports suggested that Catherine recognized the risk of allowing the situation to continue unchecked. If the tension became more visible, the evening could quickly be remembered for controversy rather than diplomacy. Witnesses later described a noticeable shift when Catherine reportedly decided to act. There was no dramatic announcement and no public confrontation. Instead, she was said to have moved calmly through the room with a level of confidence that immediately attracted attention. Guests nearby allegedly sensed that something important was unfolding even before a word was spoken. The change was subtle but unmistakable. People who had been quietly observing now seemed focused on a single question: what would happen next? As Catherine approached Laura, the atmosphere reportedly became even more tense. Those close enough to notice understood that this was no ordinary conversation. Accounts described Catherine remaining controlled and measured, avoiding any display of emotion. That restraint only added to the significance of the moment. Rather than creating a scene, she appeared determined to prevent one. According to palace gossip and reports surrounding the event, Catherine privately made it clear that the situation could not continue as it was. Exactly what was said remains a matter of speculation, but the message was widely understood. The alleged decision had been made to remove the source of disruption before the evening slipped further out of control. Whether viewed as a necessary act of leadership or an extraordinary assertion of authority, the moment marked a turning point. What had started as concern over one guest was now becoming a much larger story about responsibility, judgment, and who was willing to step forward when the monarchy's image appeared at risk. Behind the calm composure, something shifts in Catherine's decision. Was this simple damage control, or something far more decisive unfolding beneath the surface? Who truly holds power in that moment, and why did every witness suddenly fall silent as she moved? Stay with us. The moment that changed everything forever. The atmosphere inside Windsor Castle reportedly reached a breaking point the moment Catherine's private intervention produced visible results. Until then, much of the evening's tension had existed in whispers, uneasy glances, and growing concern among guests. But according to accounts surrounding the banquet, the situation entered an entirely different phase when Laura Lopes was allegedly escorted away from the gathering. What happened next became one of the most discussed aspects of the entire story, not simply because someone left the event, but because of what many believed that departure represented. Reports suggest that the removal itself was handled quietly. There were no scenes of chaos, no public shouting, and no dramatic confrontation unfolding in front of the assembled guests. In fact, much of the attention surrounding the incident comes from how controlled the process reportedly appeared. Yet despite the lack of visible drama, witnesses claimed the effect on the room was immediate. Conversations slowed, smiles faded. A tense silence seemed to settle over sections of the banquet hall as attendees tried to process what they had just witnessed. For many guests, the incident was no longer about Laura's alleged behavior. The focus had shifted toward something larger. People were reportedly watching Catherine, not because she had raised her voice or demanded attention, but because she appeared to have taken decisive action when others hesitated. In a setting built around protocol, hierarchy, and carefully managed appearances, even a quiet decision could carry enormous significance. That realization reportedly spread through the room almost as quickly as the whispers that had preceded it. At the center of growing speculation was the question of authority. Some observers allegedly interpreted the situation as evidence of Catherine's increasing confidence and influence within royal circles. Others viewed it differently, arguing that the available accounts left too many unanswered questions to draw firm conclusions. Because much of the story came through reports, insiders, and palace gossip, uncertainty remained. Nevertheless, one impression appeared difficult to ignore. To many watching, Catherine no longer looked like a royal merely reacting to events. She looked like someone actively shaping them. Meanwhile, attention gradually turned toward King Charles. According to accounts from the evening, he had become a critical observer of the unfolding situation. Guests reportedly watched closely for any indication of his reaction, understanding that his response could reveal how the incident would ultimately be viewed within royal circles. Every glance, movement, and interaction seemed to carry additional meaning. In moments like these, perception often becomes as powerful as reality, particularly inside an institution where symbolism matters almost as much as official decisions. As the banquet continued, the event's significance appeared to grow beyond a single uncomfortable episode. What started as concern surrounding one guest had evolved into a wider conversation about leadership, responsibility, and the protection of the monarchy's public image. Whether Catherine's actions were seen as necessary or controversial depended largely on perspective. Yet by the end of that moment, one thing seemed increasingly clear. The story was no longer centered on Laura alone. It had become a developing test of influence inside the royal family, and the consequences of that perception were only beginning to emerge. In that moment, the entire hall shifted into silence, as whispers spread about the order heard everywhere. But was it truly Catherine's command, or something far more calculated? And why did Charles watch without intervening? And what does this moment now set in motion? Keep watching. When loyalty collides with duty. The immediate tension surrounding Laura Lopes may have eased once she was reportedly escorted away, but the controversy itself was only beginning to grow. As conversations resumed inside Windsor Castle, attention gradually shifted from what had happened to a more complicated question: how would Queen Camilla respond? For many observers, the evening was no longer simply about an alleged disruption at a royal banquet. It was becoming a story about family, loyalty, and the difficult balance between personal relationships and royal responsibility. Although accounts of the event varied, one theme repeatedly emerged from discussions surrounding the banquet. Laura was not just another guest. She was Camilla's daughter. That fact alone gave the situation an entirely different weight. Any decision involving her would inevitably carry emotional consequences, especially within a family already operating under intense public scrutiny. As word of the alleged intervention spread through the room, speculation quickly turned toward Camilla and what she might have been thinking as events unfolded around her. Guests reportedly debated the situation from multiple perspectives. Some believed the decision to remove Laura had been necessary in order to protect the dignity of the occasion. Others questioned whether the response had gone too far, because much of the information came from reports, palace gossip, and unnamed sources. There was no universally accepted version of events. That uncertainty fueled even more discussion. In royal circles, unanswered questions often generate as much attention as confirmed facts. And this situation appeared to be no exception. For some observers, the controversy highlighted a conflict that exists far beyond a single evening. On one side stood the responsibilities attached to royal life, where image, protocol, and public perception often take priority. On the other stood the instincts of a mother whose daughter had become the center of an uncomfortable incident. Whether Camilla privately viewed the alleged intervention as justified or excessive remained unclear, but many people examining the situation through that lens saw a deeply human dilemma beneath the palace headlines. The debate became even more intense because responsibility itself was being questioned. If concerns had truly been growing throughout the banquet, who should have addressed them first? Should the matter have been handled by palace staff? Should Camilla have intervened personally? Or was Catherine right to step forward when she believed the situation threatened the event's reputation? Different answers led to different interpretations, and each interpretation carried its own implications about authority within the royal family. As these discussions spread, the narrative surrounding the banquet became increasingly complex. What initially appeared to be a straightforward account of one guest attracting attention had transformed into something much larger. The story was no longer divided between right and wrong. Instead, it revolved around competing responsibilities, competing loyalties, and competing expectations. Every perspective seemed to reveal a different version of the same event. By the end of this stage of the controversy, one reality had become difficult to ignore. The incident was no longer being judged solely by what happened inside the banquet hall. It was being measured against broader questions about family dynamics, royal leadership, and the sacrifices demanded by public duty. And as those questions continued to grow, the emotional and political consequences of the evening appeared far from settled. Camilla's reaction sends shockwaves through the palace, but how far will the fallout spread, and who is accountable for the chaos unfolding behind closed doors? Did protection cross the line into interference, and will the monarchy recover from the silent fracture forming beneath the surface? Stay glued. The king everyone was watching. As debate continued to spread through Windsor Castle, attention gradually settled on one figure whose reaction carried more weight than anyone else's. The discussion was no longer centered solely on Laura Lopes, Catherine, or even the reported intervention itself. Instead, guests, diplomats, and royal observers increasingly focused on King Charles. In moments of uncertainty within the monarchy, people often looked to the sovereign for clues about how events should be interpreted. According to accounts surrounding the banquet, this situation was no different. The alleged removal of Laura had already transformed the atmosphere of the evening. What began as concerns over one guest's behavior had evolved into a broader conversation about authority, responsibility, and judgment. Yet despite the growing speculation, there was still no official explanation of what had happened. That lack of clarity made Charles's role especially important. Whether he spoke publicly or remained silent, observers believed his response could reveal how the palace viewed the controversy behind closed doors. Reports from those discussing the event suggested that Charles appeared aware of the significance of the moment. The banquet had been intended to showcase stability, diplomacy, and royal unity. Instead, it was becoming associated with uncomfortable questions that threatened to overshadow the purpose of the gathering. For a monarch whose public role depends heavily on maintaining confidence in the institution, such situations can carry consequences beyond a single evening. Every decision, reaction, and gesture risks being examined for hidden meaning. As the event continued, palace insiders and commentators allegedly began interpreting Charles's actions through their own perspectives. Some believed he would naturally support any effort made to protect the reputation of the monarchy. Others argued that the situation involved delicate family relationships that could not be ignored. Because no clear account emerged regarding his private views, competing narratives quickly developed. In the absence of certainty, assumptions began filling the gaps. Diplomats and guests reportedly formed their own conclusions as well. Some saw Catherine's intervention as evidence of decisive leadership under pressure. Others questioned whether the matter should have been handled differently. Yet regardless of where opinions fell, many observers appeared to agree on one point. Charles's reaction mattered. The king's position placed him at the center of a story that was increasingly about more than personal conduct. It was becoming a test of how authority functioned within the royal family itself. Speculation soon expanded beyond the banquet. Discussions reportedly turned toward the issue of royal backing. If Catherine had acted, did she have the confidence that her judgment would be supported? If Charles accepted the outcome, what message would that send about influence inside the monarchy? These questions remained unanswered, but they continued to fuel intense interest among those following the story. What made the situation especially significant was the possibility that people were witnessing more than a temporary controversy. Some observers believed the event offered a glimpse into evolving dynamics within the royal household. Others warned that such interpretations relied too heavily on rumor and incomplete information. Even so, the focus on Charles revealed how dramatically the narrative had changed. The banquet was no longer simply about an alleged incident involving Laura Lopes. It had become a wider examination of leadership, authority, and the future balance of influence within the monarchy. As Charles weighs the consequences of his response, insiders begin to whisper about shifting power inside the palace. But who is truly steering the reaction? And why are diplomats suddenly reconsidering their loyalties? And could this moment redefine royal influence forever? Beyond Windsor, the story spreads. What happened inside Windsor Castle did not stay inside Windsor Castle. By the time the banquet had ended, the alleged incident involving Laura Lopes had already begun taking on a life of its own. What started as whispered concern among guests was now becoming the subject of broader discussion throughout royal and aristocratic circles. The details remained uncertain, the accounts often conflicted, and no official narrative appeared to settle the growing speculation. Yet that uncertainty only seemed to increase public interest. In royal stories, unanswered questions often travel faster than confirmed facts. As reports and rumors circulated, people began reconstructing the evening through their own interpretations. Some accounts focused on Laura's alleged behavior and the tension it reportedly created during the event. Others concentrated almost entirely on Catherine's response, viewing her intervention as the most significant development of the night. Because much of the information came through palace gossip, insider claims, and second-hand accounts, different versions of the same story quickly emerged. Each version emphasized different details, leading observers toward very different conclusions. Within those competing narratives, support for both sides began to appear. Some commentators reportedly expressed sympathy toward Camilla, arguing that any mother would find such a situation difficult if her daughter became the focus of controversy during a major royal occasion. From that perspective, the story was not simply about protocol or public image. It was also about family, personal loyalty, and the emotional consequences of being placed under intense scrutiny in front of influential guests. At the same time, others viewed the situation through an entirely different lens. They pointed to Catherine's reported composure throughout the evening and argued that she had acted to protect the dignity of an important royal event. To these observers, the key issue was not family loyalty, but responsibility. They believed that allowing uncertainty or disruption to continue during a gathering, attended by diplomats and senior figures, could have created even greater problems. As a result, Catherine's actions were interpreted by some as evidence of calm leadership under pressure. The deeper the debate becomes, the further it moves away from the original incident itself. Discussions increasingly focused on what the event might reveal about the future direction of the monarchy. Questions emerged regarding influence, authority, and the roles different senior royals might play in the years ahead. Although no confirmed answers existed, speculation grew around how moments like this could shape public perceptions of leadership during a period of transition for the royal family. Not everyone accepted these broader conclusions. Critics argued that too much meaning was being attached to a story built largely on rumor and incomplete information. They cautioned against turning one controversial evening into evidence of larger institutional change. Their skepticism highlighted an important reality. Much of the fascination surrounding the incident came from what people believed it represented rather than what could actually be proven. Yet regardless of which interpretation seemed most convincing, one fact remained difficult to ignore. The banquet was no longer remembered simply as a royal gathering at Windsor Castle. It had evolved into a wider debate about loyalty, judgment, and leadership. And as those conversations continued spreading beyond palace walls, the controversy appeared to be entering an even more consequential phase than before. As rumors spread beyond Windsor, the palace finds itself surrounded by competing truths. But who is controlling the narrative? And why are loyalties suddenly shifting inside royal circles? And could this silent power struggle reshape the future of the monarchy itself in the coming days? Stay tuned. A glimpse of tomorrow's crown. As the controversy continued to spread beyond Windsor Castle, the focus of the story began changing once again. What had started as discussions surrounding Laura Lopes and an alleged intervention at a royal banquet was gradually evolving into something far larger. Increasingly, observers were no longer concentrating on the details of the incident itself. Instead, attention was shifting toward Catherine and what her reported actions might reveal about her place within the monarchy. Whether fair or not, the evening was becoming a symbolic moment in the eyes of many who followed royal affairs. The transformation happened gradually. In the immediate aftermath, most conversations centered on the reported removal and the questions it raised. Yet as time passed, commentators, royal watchers, and palace observers allegedly began examining the event through a different lens. Rather than asking only what happened, they started asking what the situation suggested about leadership. The controversy appeared to become a case study in how senior members of the royal family respond when unexpected challenges arise in highly visible settings. Much of this attention focused on Catherine's composure. Throughout the various accounts surrounding the banquet, one recurring theme emerged. Supporters argued that she had remained calm during a potentially uncomfortable situation and had acted with the broader interests of the event in mind. Whether those interpretations were fully justified remained open to debate, but they contributed to a growing perception that Catherine was increasingly comfortable carrying the responsibilities associated with her future role. At the same time, skepticism remained. Critics pointed out that much of the narrative surrounding the evening depended on reports, speculation, and palace gossip rather than confirmed information. They argued that observers could be reading too much into a single event. From that perspective, transforming one controversial banquet into evidence of long-term change risked creating conclusions unsupported by the available facts. Even so, the existence of that debate demonstrated how much the story had expanded beyond its original boundaries. As discussions intensified, questions about influence and authority became impossible to ignore. The alleged intervention was no longer being viewed simply as a response to an uncomfortable situation. For some observers, it appeared to represent a broader shift in how Catherine was perceived within royal circles. Her actions, whether praised or criticized, seemed to place her at the center of conversations about leadership, judgment, and responsibility. In many ways, the symbolism attached to the event had become more significant than the incident itself. That symbolism also extended to wider discussions about the monarchy's future. The royal family was already navigating a period of transition, and moments that appeared to reveal emerging leadership naturally attracted attention. As a result, the banquet became linked to larger questions about how the institution might evolve in the years ahead. While no single event could determine the future direction of the monarchy, observers increasingly treated this controversy as a revealing snapshot of changing dynamics within the royal household. By this stage, the story had traveled far beyond the original allegations surrounding Laura Lopez. The banquet was no longer remembered primarily for what reportedly happened that evening. Instead, it had become a discussion about perception, authority, and the future image of the crown. And as those conversations continued, many believed the most important question was no longer what occurred at Windsor Castle, but what the reaction to it revealed about the monarchy itself. So, what do you think? Was Catherine right to intervene at Windsor, or did she overstep royal boundaries in a shocking moment? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.